The room remembers the moment like a bruise remembers pressure, a plan executed with the calm of a surgeon, not the fury of a mob. No speeches, no dramatic flourish, only a sequence of choices so precise they read like a map to anyone paying attention. People expected a breakdown. They expected a meltdown, a performance of pain that could be parried with pity and chatter. Instead, there was quiet. That quiet carried intent. It told a story without words. It showed that the edge had been honed in private, that every misstep had been cataloged and turned into instruction. The crowd felt the shift like wind before a storm. Not loud, but inevitable. The difference between acting and being becomes a weapon when used without fanfare. Harvesting restraint into power teaches a lesson nobody enjoys learning the hard way. No applause, only consequence. And when consequence arrives with measured steps, the world trembles because it recognizes the craft behind the act, the discipline that made mercy optional and victory certain. Skeptics called it cold. Lovers called it tragic. Onlookers called it fortune. None of those labels mattered in the moment when the plan unfolded. It was not about revenge for its own sake. It was about correction. A ledger of misdeeds finally balanced not by noise but by motion. The method was clinical. Remove the variables, remove the witnesses who trade in rumors, then rearrange the pieces so the truth becomes a fact others cannot ignore. That kind of execution does not demand validation. It refuses the indulgence of drama. Instead, it leverages rhythm, timing, repetition. Every small action became a note in a symphony designed to stop the performance of deceit. The players who once danced on other people's pain now found themselves out of step. This kind of effect teaches a broader lesson. Mastery over impulse beats impulse every time. Calm is not indifference. Calm is strategy dressed as peace. There is a psychology to silence. It's a tactic that teachers and tyrants both understand. Silence makes others uncomfortable because humans crave narrative. When someone refuses to feed the script, the hungry invent one. That hunger becomes the manipulator's problem. People begin supplying motives, inventing conspiracies, projecting their guilt onto the stillness. The silence that followed the execution was therefore explosive. It forced the guilty to speak, to contradict themselves, to show the creases in rehearsed lies. That is how the truth emerges when emotion is removed from the equation. Deceptive patterns are fragile. They collapse when not propped up by reactions. Observers learned an ugly truth in that room. The real danger is not the blade you can see. It is the quiet pattern that no longer requires buying into chaos. Once silence becomes a method, hysteria becomes the enemy's only currency. A mind trained to act without emotional distraction becomes frighteningly efficient. Practice has a way of automating response so that instinct serves purpose, not panic. Training creates space between stimulus and reaction, and in that space decisions are forged. The execution in question was not a fluke but practice made visible. Training rarely feels glamorous. It feels boring at first. Repetition, refusal of indulgence, focus on detail. The secret is that boredom builds tolerance. Tolerance breeds structure. Structure reduces error. When structure guides action, outcomes follow with a precision that passes for ruthlessness because it refuses chaos as an ally. Up close, the method is deceptively simple. Step 1, observe. Step 2, remove option for manipulation. Step 3, act. The rest is logistics. People mistake restraint for weakness because it hides the months or years of hidden work that created the capacity to act cleanly when the moment demands it. There is a social cost to moving like a blade. The world rewards theatrics and punishes silence. Empathy expects pain to look a certain way. Culture adores spectacle. When someone breaks the script and instead fixes the problem, the crowd's moral meter misfires. Outrage wants faces, but precision offers consequences without drama. That ruffles feathers. It strips gossip of its fuel and forces onlookers to face facts rather than narratives. The emotional economy collapses because pity, gossip, alliances, all those worn social currencies, lose value against a result. People then scramble for a new story because identity rests on being part of a plot. The person who executed with calm did not care about narratives. That's why the threat was felt deeper. The entertainment value evaporated and was replaced by accountability. Accountability makes people uncomfortable. It's immediate and exhausting. It requires admission, repair, or exile. That is not theater. It is order. Power that arrives without theater leaves a particular kind of dread. It teaches a lesson that doesn't need repeating. The threat hangs like a sentence that was already pronounced and needs no echo. Others realize any attempt to recreate the earlier dynamic now risks the same precision turned back on them. Control flips because methods change hands. Talent for manipulation is common. Talent for removing manipulation without melodrama is not. Once observers understand that consequences can be administered quietly and effectively, the environment adjusts. Manipulators find fewer partners. The smart ones recalibrate. The rest panic. That panic looks foolish when viewed against someone who simply carried out the plan and continued walking. Threat no longer waits in the shadows. It sits in plain sight, contained and legal and terrible. That is a structure people fear, because structures endure. There is an art to detachment that even the violent envy. Detachment doesn't equal cruelty. It equals focus. It allows a mind to see threads that the frantic miss. When the right string is pulled, reactions appear like clockwork. The execution was a demonstration of pulling strings with discipline, of operating a network of cause and effect with the patience of someone who understands leverage. Leverage doesn't care for moral theater. It cares for outcomes. A single precise act delivered at the right time can collapse entire empires of pretense. That is the paradox. The lack of fury made the outcome more severe because fury is sloppy. Fury breaks things randomly. Cold precision breaks only what needs breaking. The moral of the story is not to numb oneself to pain, but to learn where pain produces wisdom, and where reaction only fuels the abuser's expectations. When the crowd finally stops babbling and starts reading facts, a second wave arrives. People who were once complicit begin triangulating their loyalty against evidence. The execution forced a recalibration in social risk. Allies reconsider the price of staying. Reputation, once a weapon used to assault others, turns into a liability. Those who built influence through deceit see it erode as the same audience demands clarity. The method used against manipulation was to illuminate decisions, not to dramatize them. With the facts lined up, defensive narratives collapse because they no longer mask motive. The most dangerous effect is that others learn to expect this behavior. The threat multiplies not from more cruelty, but from the simple knowledge that precision can be applied again if necessary. That education is terrifying to those who relied on chaos as currency. A lesson folded into this story is ethical, not just tactical. Acting with zero visible emotion does not teach callousness. It teaches responsibility. When the goal becomes repair or protection rather than spectacle, emotions are counterproductive. Emotions ask for renegotiation with wrongdoers. Strategy produces an outcome that does not require ongoing debate. The joker might laugh at tenderness, but strategy laughs last by design. The funny thing about such strategy is its moral clarity. It pronounces what is unacceptable and enforces consequences without indulging the offended in therapy theater. People feel threatened because their comfortable lies can no longer be maintained. The moral cost of exposure collapses their safety. That exposure is a social justice that looks cold because it refuses to be performative. There is a dangerous beauty in silence used as method. It draws attention because it refuses the currency of noise. People are addicted to moral drama. They need villains to feel justified. When justice is administered without drama, it deprives spectators of catharsis and leaves them with the harder work of reflection. That absence of spectacle is the ultimate cut. It communicates that suffering is not a show and that consequences are not an argument. The execution in the story delivered a result that required no cheering, no vindication posts, no vindictive speeches. It simply recalibrated the social ledger, adjusted trust metrics, and moved on. The community that once fed on scandal now looked inward, and that introspection was the real punishment for those who preyed on others. There comes a point when explanations lose their value. Words become smoke, and promises sound rehearsed. In toxic environments, deception doesn't knock loudly. It slips in through trust, wearing the face of understanding. The liar counts on reaction. They want emotion, confusion, and argument to twist. But the calm mind refuses performance. When lies arrive, the one who's learned stays quiet, collecting fragments others overlook. Screenshots, dates, tone shifts, inconsistencies, they all become puzzle pieces waiting for order. Evidence becomes the shield and sword. No confrontation needed, no shouting match required. Just truth, neatly presented when the moment calls for it. The deceiver expects drama and receives documentation instead. That's when power flips. The manipulator learns that control ends where proof begins. And silence, once mistaken for weakness, becomes the prelude to exposure. In those environments, deception always thinks it's clever. The liar rehearses their story, plays both victim and hero, all while weaving small traps of half-truths. They believe no one pays attention because chaos works as camouflage. But observation is the greatest weapon. The quiet ones memorize timelines, sense tone changes, feel emotional temperature shifts in rooms others call normal. Evidence starts forming long before anyone suspects it. The liar thinks control belongs to them, but the observer already holds the truth like a blade behind the back. No need for theatrics, no need for warning, just the right moment. When it comes, the curtain falls. The truth lands heavier when delivered without rage. That's the moment deception realizes its game was being recorded the entire time. In toxic relationships, deception feeds on empathy. Manipulators rely on the other person's heart to blur facts with feelings. They say what's needed to reset the balance temporarily, to keep the cycle spinning. But emotions distort memory. That's why evidence becomes vital. It saves clarity when confusion is weaponized. Journals, texts, repeated patterns, all of it matters. The liar can rewrite stories, but not records. When evidence enters the room, it silences distortion. No apology, no performance can undo what proof makes visible. The betrayed doesn't need to scream. They just need to show. And when they do, the manipulator loses their grip completely. There's no comeback from a truth that's been time-stamped. Most deceit fails because arrogance makes people sloppy. The manipulative forgets that time exposes repetition. They recycle words, gestures, lies. They change faces, not patterns. The observant person stops arguing about the betrayal and starts mapping it. Each inconsistency becomes a coordinate. Eventually, the map reveals the entire structure of manipulation. At that point, confrontation becomes optional. There's no need for revenge when evidence speaks louder. The deceiver loses dignity because truth carries its own weight. When faced with proof, denial sounds hollow. The liar talks, but the words don't land. They bounce off the certainty that facts provide. The room watches as the mask disintegrates under the heat of its own exposure. Deception in workplaces follows the same rhythm. The conniving co-worker, the power-hungry boss, the whisper campaigns, all built on assumption that others won't track patterns. But precision dismantles manipulation better than outrage. The calm professional documents. Every false promise, every shift in tone, every contradiction is quietly logged. People who weaponize lies thrive on reactions. They fear receipts, because once receipts exist, the story no longer belongs to them. Power leaves the mouth of the deceiver and sits inside the folder of the observer. It takes one moment of exposure to turn the entire structure upside down. No shouting necessary, just evidence. A weapon of peace disguised as truth. The psychology of deception is simple. It survives on temporary blindness. It depends on others reacting emotionally instead of rationally. That's why manipulators provoke. They need chaos to confuse timelines, to mix feelings with facts. The moment calm enters the picture, they lose command. The still person becomes unpredictable. Observation creates patterns. Patterns expose motive. The deceiver, caught in a loop, repeats their manipulation unaware it's being logged. When evidence replaces anger, justice stops being a theory. It becomes a natural progression. Deception hates data because data doesn't negotiate. Facts have no sympathy, no bias, no agenda. Facts end conversations that lies depend on. Every toxic situation has a turning point. It's the moment silence shifts from surrender to awareness. The one who was doubted starts connecting small moments, phrases that didn't match actions, stories that changed slightly with every retelling. The puzzle forms quietly, and once it's complete, it's irreversible. The manipulative sense the change but can't identify it. They feel power slipping but can't locate the leak. That's what makes evidence dangerous. It moves invisibly until it's undeniable. When presented, it doesn't scream, "I told you so." It simply states, "Here's what happened." That stillness delivers more destruction than anger ever could. In relationships poisoned by deceit, evidence restores sanity. Lies distort reality so efficiently that truth starts to feel distant. Evidence anchors reality again. It gives shape to what gaslighting tried to blur. Once the proof surfaces, self-doubt dies. The person who once apologized for everything starts realizing nothing was wrong with their perception. The relief that follows is sharp, like oxygen after drowning. That's why deception fears documentation. It kills its favorite illusion: control over perception. And when perception returns to truth, the manipulator loses their only weapon. What follows exposure is silence, and that silence carries a different tone. It's not tension, it's recalibration. Those who used lies as currency begin to panic, not because they were caught, but because credibility doesn't regenerate once destroyed. The calm person doesn't gloat, they simply stop engaging. The absence of reaction feels louder than any accusation. That's when deception dies completely, not when exposed, but when ignored. Once it can no longer extract emotion, it ceases to exist. That's how truth wins, not by shouting, but by continuing without explanation. Every lie starts small, just enough to patch a moment of guilt or buy a little time. The person who tells it thinks it will dissolve quietly. But lies are living things. They breathe through repetition, grow through attention, and demand constant feeding. One false statement becomes 2, then 10, each one trying to keep the others alive. It's exhausting work, even for the practiced. The liar learns that deception is not freedom. It's a full-time job. Every conversation becomes a minefield. Every question feels like a trap. They start monitoring tone, rewriting memories, scanning faces for suspicion. Truth is effortless. Lies require rehearsal. Eventually, the performance becomes the prison. The lie starts owning its maker, and the maintenance never stops. By the time exhaustion sets in, the truth has already begun to rot through the surface, turning their confidence into cracks that no charm can fill. In toxic relationships, the maintenance of lies becomes a daily ritual. A partner lies about feelings, motives, whereabouts, anything that keeps control intact. The deceit isn't random, it's crafted to maintain an image, to manipulate sympathy, to avoid accountability. But maintaining a false world requires constant vigilance. They have to remember what they said last week, who heard it, how it sounded. One inconsistency exposes the entire structure. So the deceiver starts living like a fugitive, running from their own narrative. The relationship becomes a stage performance where every conversation has to align with the last act. Eventually, fatigue turns into fear. The liar begins to resent the person they're deceiving, not because they did anything wrong, but because they represent the risk of exposure. That's how dishonesty corrodes love. It replaces affection with anxiety. Every falsehood becomes another string tied to guilt, and guilt always finds its way back. In workplaces built on manipulation, lies function like currency. Leaders tell staff what they want to hear. Coworkers twist numbers, shift blame, and hide flaws behind buzzwords. At first, the deception feels like strategy. It buys comfort and reputation. But time erodes performance that isn't rooted in truth. The liar starts forgetting which version of reality they shared with which person. Meetings turn into balancing acts of half-truths. The smallest question can ruin months of illusion. The energy spent maintaining image drains productivity. Those who work with integrity may move slower, but they move clean. The dishonest always move fast until they trip over their own stories.